If your personal finances are a mess, it can negatively impact your practice. And the opposite is true. If your practice is not organizing its finances well, then your personal life and your personal budget are going to take a hit. Today, Alicia Durham, our Director of Personal Finance Coaching, joins us to talk about personal finances and how you as a business owner can use your practice to help fuel your personal goals. My name is Craig, and I'm the CEO of Daisy Financial Coaching. Our goal is simple: to help you run a therapy practice that is permanently profitable. If you own a solo or group practice, we're here to help you build a business that creates more time, makes more money, and serves more people. This is the Therapy Business Podcast. All right, Alicia Durham is here. She's part of our team, and I'm pumped to talk to her about personal finances today. Alicia, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited.
Awesome. So Alicia, you're the Director of Personal Finance Coaching with us. And so your bread and butter is working with people on personal finances. And as we know, that's important for business owners. And we work with a lot of business owners, both on the business and personal side. And I just know there's a huge connection there. There's a huge problem. If one is struggling, the other one can sometimes struggle. They go hand in hand. And so I think it's really important to dig into that and talk about some aspects of it. But first, I want to, since this is your first time on the show, I want to hear a little bit about you. I know you, but no one listening knows about you. So tell us about you, what you do. Share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Alicia. I've been on this team for a couple years now. I've always had a passion for helping people with their money. I had for many years before even joining this team, just helped friends and family with their finances. And Craig and I have known each other even before starting working here. And I told Craig many times before that, oh gosh, I'd love to be a money coach one day. Just never kind of took that leap until he invited me to join this team. And it's just been the most amazing, most rewarding work in the entire world. Outside of money coaching, I am married. I guess Stephen and I have been married for 10 years now, have 2 daughters, 12 and 8, and 10 chickens, 2 dogs, 2 cats,
Living that farm
Lots
life.
of things to keep alive over here. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's been awesome having you here. When Alicia first joined with me, it was just me. I was all by myself, and then I brought Alicia in as my first person, largely because I was focusing on businesses, and we had a lot of people who needed help with the personal side. That's what I started with when I started the business, and so it was great to have you come in and really just take it over and serve people tenfold better than what I was doing with them before that. And so, which is why I think it's great to have you here, because I want to talk about the personal finance side. So we've been spending, all of our episodes are about the business and how to grow it or how to manage the finances. But we talk a lot about paying yourself more, and as a business owner, prioritizing that, largely because the personal finances typically suffer with the business, and emotionally they're really connected. I know you have worked with a handful of business owners. What do you typically see if somebody owns a business and they come to you for the first time? What are some of the common problems, the common issues that you typically see across the board?
Yeah. So I would say a big one is just lack of clarity on both sides. So oftentimes if a business owner comes to me and they start working on their personal finances and they've not worked with you or Vanessa or any of our other business coaches, they just lack clarity on really what they're able to pay themselves from their business. And stacked on top of that, they also lack clarity on their personal finance side of what they actually need to get paid in order to cover their, bills and live the life that they're wanting to live. So I think that can tend to lead to a lot of reactivity with people. So they're just kind of drawing from their business whenever they feel like they need to get paid, and not totally sure the domino effect that's going to create on the business side. But then also wondering when am I going to need to pay myself next? How much am I going to need to pay myself next? So just a lot of anxiety and reactivity.
Yeah, 100%. And it's this yo-yo effect sometimes of pulling a lot of money out because either you need a lot for your personal, or money's good in the business, so you pull a lot out, and then all of a sudden you see the ripple effect in the business, it's suffering, and so you maybe do without, you are afraid to take money out for yourself. And then you see the effect of that on the personal side. And it's just this back and forth of, extremes. It's just reacting. Like you said, it's that reacting to everything instead of having a game plan and going in with purpose.
Yeah, which then can lead to avoidance for a lot of people because they just don't
Me
want to
included. Yep.
they just don't want to face the music because it feels like maybe it'd just be this mountain to climb. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's totally how I react. That's why I need a plan or a system, because I'm avoider 101. If you any of you therapists need a case study on somebody who avoids, I am willing to do it. It's paid, of course. You're gonna have to pay me to, but I mean, if I get an email that is, something that maybe is stressful or not a positive one, or something that's going to take a lot of work, my typical reaction is close that email down. I'm not going to face it. And so,
Yeah. We'll deal with that later. And then later never comes. And
totally.
then there's 5 other emails on the talk to you later file.
Yes. Yep. It's just this hope that maybe it'll resolve itself. And I think that's what we see. Maybe whether people are aware of it or not, that's kind of when you're avoiding those personal finances or the business finances, it's maybe this will just kind of work itself out. If I just don't look at it and just kind of keep chugging along, eventually maybe it'll just get better on its own. And so we know firsthand that that's not true, right? It hardly ever just works out on its own. So when you first meet with someone, talk to me about, I guess, that process of they come to you, they tell you what they're struggling with, and you go, yes, I can help you. Where do you guys go from there? They get on a coaching call. What do you guys like to tackle? What do you like to tackle first, I guess, when you're looking at personal finances?
Yeah. So the first thing we really do is just gain clarity on their personal finances. What are their expenses? Oftentimes we'll maybe start with like an average of what they've kind of paid themselves over the last few months, maybe 6 months or so, and kind of start from there to see, if that's going to cover everything that they need. But I would definitely say the first step that we do is we gain clarity. We figure out, what are all your bills? What are all the expenses that you have? What are the things that we need to be preparing for in your future with your finances to make sure that they're able to pay themselves what they need? And then that kind of helps them at least come up with a consistent number that they can set a goal towards paying themselves, every single month. So kind of starting with that clarity, really.
You got it. Yeah. You have to know what you're dealing with, right? You have to know what the business needs to pay you. I did an episode a few back. I'll link it in the show notes about how to pay yourself more. And the first step was getting a snapshot on what your personal life needs. What is your must have your survival budget look like? What does your ideal budget look like? And knowing how to do that. And the other thing we have is a personal finance snapshot document that can help people get that organized. I think you have everybody fill that out when they work with you.
Yeah.
But that's something that we can also link in that people can snag. We'll email it to you. And it's just a list of core expenses. These are the things like to help you get that thought process out. Because if you haven't been organized, it's sometimes hard to sit down and be like, yeah, what do we spend money on? Like, what do I need? Just something to jog that memory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think gaining clarity, it's a huge first step. And some people, they get to the bottom of that line and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm in the negative. This is why it has felt so reactive. This is why pulling from my business has felt so reactive. And then the concerns of how that, the domino effect with my business, why that's been so stressful. But then at least they have that number. They've got that negative number. And so now they've got that clarity and they have something to shoot for. And then now we can start setting goals of like, how can we start like baby steps, increasing your income so that we're no longer in a negative, we're in a positive. And that's always so scary, but it's also like exciting and empowering to know what you need to do.
Totally. It's crazy how seeing a negative number and even seeing something that's maybe as bad as you thought, even if you're like, yep, that's as bad as I thought it was going to be. It could still feel 1,000 times better just knowing that it exists. But how often would you say you sit down with somebody and you're like, it's way better than they thought? Like they've been avoiding this thing and you're like, hey, surprise, it's not, you're actually in really good shape.
Yeah, I actually have a call coming up with a client today who it's very much going to be that way where, I've already looked at his numbers and I can see we've got a good cushion to work with at the end. But I know in prior conversations, he's been afraid that he doesn't have that.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's so exciting when that happens. It does happen, somewhat regularly where there's extra money. And then that's when we can start talking about, okay, what are your goals? Like beyond just covering your expenses. Now, what do you actually want to use your money for? What's that? What are your values? What kind of life are you trying to build? And how can we use your money as a tool to start moving in that direction? So yes, that's always so exciting.
Love that. Yeah, you're right. It catches them off guard, and so because usually they're like, "Oh, I'm living check to check. I barely make it till the end of the month." So sometimes I remember sitting down and like,
Yes.
"Hey, guess what? You just got a pay raise. You have an extra
Mm-hmm.
500, extra thousand, whatever it is per month that we see here. That's truthfully just been slipping through their fingers, and that's the cost of
Yeah.
not paying attention, right?"
Yes. And I also have found oftentimes when that is the case where someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, but then they fill out this snapshot and it shows this big positive at the end. Typically, what that tells me is maybe this person hasn't been spending their money on things that really bring them joy, or on things that are really valuable to them. It maybe just feels like their money is flying in all these different directions. Um, and it may not be just going to those things as most valuable to them. So that's always so exciting when we get to direct it towards really what do you love to spend your money on? And let's
Hmm.
make sure we're directing our money in those things. And what do you really not want to be spending your money on? And let's get intentional about maybe, cutting back a little bit on those so we can spend way more on the stuff that you want to.
Yeah, if somebody looks at your bank account, they should be able to get a sense of who you are, what your values are, what your priorities are.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's typically when we're stressed out and frustrated with our finances is when that's not true. If somebody looks at your bank account and they see, they'd be like, "Oh, you must really value Taco Bell because you spend a lot of money there." And you're like,
Yes.
"I don't value Taco Bell," or maybe you do, and you're like, "Yep, that's it. I'm happy with
Maybe,
that."
yeah, like, yes, I want to spend more money at Taco Bell.
Yes,
Okay.
those Doritos Locos. But typically it's no, that's not.
Gross, by the way. Well, that is not, oh, you won't see Taco Bell on my bank statements ever.
My wife hates Taco Bell, so I haven't eaten there in a long time. But once in a while,
Oh,
if she's out of
well,
town and I'm got like a bachelor weekend or something, I'm like, what can I eat that's just
yes.
awful for me that I don't normally get to eat while they're here, and then I ruin the bachelor weekend because I have a stomach ache all weekend long. So
Oh, man. Well, you and Steven can go get Taco Bell together. And,
okay,
you know, me
yeah.
and Andy can go do something else.
Y'all can be a little bit better to your bodies.
Well, I
So
mean, no, something equally unhealthy, just not Taco Bell.
that's true. Okay, okay. So with your priorities, and I had a call with a client yesterday to that point where we were looking at a pie chart. We've been working together for a few years now, and we pulled up a pie chart of her spending, and we kind of were talking about when we first started, what was important to her as her family. It was travel, and she wasn't able to spend anything on that. And then when we pulled up the pie chart of
Yeah.
like what did you spend most on in the last 12 months or the bigger sections as we looked at them were like travel and it was those things. And for once, and I told her, I was like, if I didn't know anything about you and I were to look at this pie chart, I would be able to tell you exactly what you care about. And it's traveling and
Yeah.
spending time with your family and giving. That was another big
Hmm.
segment. So if we were to show you a pie chart of your spending, it's going to tell you what you value, whether it's true or not. And so I
Yeah.
think what you do with
Hmm.
people and what you prioritize is helping them figure out what's important to them and how do they make the money
Yeah.
work around that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because sometimes we can spend our money based on things that we think we should,
Hmm.
based off of something someone else has said or someone in their community or something like that, or even just, reacted like friends want to go hang out. And that's always so fun. But maybe it's like happening more regularly, whereas you have other goals that you might want to be directing your money towards. So just, yeah, gaining that clarity on where is our money actually going and do we like that picture that's being formed, and
Yes.
gaining that clarity and then pivoting if we want to and if we need to.
Yeah. So if somebody comes to you and they're just swamped with debt, how do you approach that? What do you suggest people do there? Because there's obviously the Dave Ramsey's of the world who say, don't do anything, don't spend a single cent on anything
Yeah.
except for that debt.
Rice and
Uh,
beans.
I know, right? Yeah, that's all you're allowed to do. You're not allowed to have
Taco
fun.
Bell every day.
No
Rest in
talk,
peace.
not even Taco Bell. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody comes to you with that. What's your approach to that? Is it to put them on an extreme plan? Walk me through what you do with people, or what you recommend people do.
Yeah, so we definitely want it to be sustainable. And I always gauge off of how urgent, that specific debt is for this person to pay off. Some people feel more urgent about things than others, and that's okay. There's that whole saying that you have to be gazelle intent. So, like, you're running away from a predator or whatever and get this thing paid off as soon as possible. And I think some people are really fueled by that. And that works really well for them. And so I say, all right, let's go. Like, what are the things we're going to cut? Let's do it that way. But I would say most people that I talk to, they have at least one or two things that they just feel they need to allow in their budgets in order to make it sustainable. Because what we don't want is burnout. Some people, if they're running like a gazelle, I mean, a gazelle can only run so fast for a certain amount of time before it completely burns out.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure we're pacing ourselves right until we can reach the finish line. And so for some people, that is like, I need to be able to go out to eat a few times a month. That's our family is busy. We're out and about all the time. That's just, what's going to be most sustainable for us. So yeah, I like to really get to know my clients really well and understand what fuels them the most, and then use those things as motivation to kind of push them forward. It's okay to pace yourself if you need to in order to pay these things off and to still live your life. While you're paying off, any sort of debt. So
Yeah, I think that's great. It's not a either or. It's not a pay off debt or enjoy some
yeah,
life. It's a both and. You
yeah,
can pay off debt and you can do these other things at the same time. I think it goes
absolutely.
back to that plan, being proactive. Just knowing, here's how if I choose to
Yes.
go all in, that means I can't do these things. If I choose to, sprinkle in some of these things, that just means it's going to take a little longer to get out of debt. And just knowing that that's okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then just owning it. Like, this is the way I'm going to do it, own it. And then I get to hold their hands along the way and then hold them accountable to the plan that they decided that they wanted to do. Um, which is just so much fun watching people like accomplish things, setting um, little milestone goals along the way is also a ton of fun too. Picking, like, I don't know, say you've got $10,000 in debt that you're trying to pay off. How about every $1,000 you treat yourself to a hike or
Mm-hmm.
something like that? And that really trains your mind to um, get addicted to the process of setting and reaching goals. And it trains your mind that setting goals works. And it helps fuel you towards actually reaching that end goal too.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, break up those milestones, give something a little bit, especially if you have a larger number, something just a little bit more attainable. A nice dinner, and if you got 100,000 in debt, maybe when you get that halfway mark, you take a weekend trip or do something a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Make
Yeah.
them.
Because there's a lot of life to live in the process too. So we don't need to end our lives to reach, some goal. Like, we've got a lot of life to live right now too. So
That's a
yeah,
great
it's
point.
all
I think
about
that's
balance.
Yeah, and it's about everybody being different and what's like you had said, what's best for you.
Yes.
When we were getting out of debt, it was just my wife and I. We didn't have any kids yet, so we were more
Hmm.
extreme than we would be now. We still went out to
Yeah.
eat, but I would say we did. There was a lot we sacrificed on in order to try and do it quickly. But fast forward now,
Hmm.
as we have kids, I have a 7 and 8 year old. I probably would go a lot. I wouldn't be as aggressive because
Yeah.
I personally don't want to miss out on these prime years. You think about your kids and the
Exactly.
lifespan. I'm like, you really just have them for such a small time, and they're only little for so long that
Hmm.
it's like I want to enjoy it responsibly. Enjoy responsibly, right? It's a
Yes.
Budweiser,
Yeah.
whatever, whoever that is. But enjoy this time, but not. But we're not also throwing caution into the wind and just spending every dime we have and
Exactly.
saying we'll clean that up
Yes.
later.
And we're setting an example to our children of what it looks like to enjoy your hard earned money and also be responsible with it. And just setting that balance too. I mean, Stephen and I were the same when we paid off our debt. I think we had like $30,000 in student loan debt. And I remember we spent like $300 a month on groceries every month. And like we got these things paid off as soon as we possibly could. But by the end of that journey, it was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm exhausted. I'm so excited to like kind of move ahead. But now with kids, like, we had these dreams of like, buying a house and getting it paid off in 10 years and that sort of thing. But kids kind of entered the picture and we've slowed down a little bit in our goals and the way that we manage our money. It's slowed down a little bit so that we can enjoy these years with our kids, of course, responsibly. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's up to personality, season in life, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect. And I personally think, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, but that same is true for taking on debt. If you're going to borrow money, just making sure that it kind of lines up with your values.
Yeah.
Once again, somebody can say, or the Dave Ramsey's of the world can say, never borrow a cent. But you may say for us, it's worth it in this realm. Again, having that plan. The worst debt to me is when you fall into it and then you just, next thing you know, you look back and you're over your head.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely agree. I think people can certainly leverage debt. But it's important to, of course, run the numbers, run worst case scenarios. Like if I take this on, what is the worst thing that could happen? And am I prepared for that worst thing?
Yeah.
Just in case. So of course we want to run the numbers, that sort of thing, make sure it's going to the pros outweigh the cons. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's your money. And if you want to take on a little debt to maybe even make money, whether it's a rental house or whatever, it's up to you. And there's no shame in that. But of course we're running numbers. The math has to math, right, Craig?
Yes, the math has to math. You're right. So, but just knowing that your core values as a family, where do we line up with that? So we teach a lot about, on the business side, about profit first and using multiple bank accounts. I know that when you're working with clients, you suggest a few bank accounts as well. Talk to me through that process. What do you usually recommend they do, and how does that work?
Yeah, so I love it because when I'm working with clients who are also working with like you or Vanessa or other profit coaches, I think our systems kind of line up very easily. And so, yes, I recommend a couple different checking accounts.
Okay.
I recommend one checking account for bills. So this is the account that your income is kind of going into, and this is directly where you pay your bills from. And then I also recommend my clients set up a separate checking account for their day-to-day spending. So this is where they will buy their groceries, their gas, anything that they're spending money on a monthly basis to live their lives, but it's not necessarily a bill, goes into that separate checking account. So it's kind of a safety fence that protects their spending from their bills. And the really fun thing about this separate checking account is, since it is protected from your bills and your savings, which I'll talk about in a second, there's really no need to penny and dime what is happening in that checking account. All that my clients really need to worry about is making sure that that amount in that checking account is lasting them from one transfer to the next. I actually often recommend that my clients do a transfer every week because it's just easy to look at a week's worth of money. Instead of looking at, oh my gosh, I got a whole month of this money. Oftentimes they can spend it all up front and then they can so I recommend weekly transfers. And then in that case, all we got to look at is like making sure this amount lasts us from one transfer to the next. They've got their separate spending checking account. And then back to the hub account where their income is going in and they're paying their bills. This is also where they're going to set aside money for savings every single month. And I think this is the thing that makes the biggest impact for most people with their finances. And this is the thing that keeps people from that reactive cycle that we were talking about earlier in this call, where we are preparing very intentionally for things that are going to come up in life. It's not necessarily things that we're spending money on every single month, like our day-to-day spending or our bills. But it is money that we know we're going to have to spend on something, and it's usually a big something eventually. So we're talking travel, we're talking holidays, we're talking something not so fun, like a car tire blowing out, something going on with the house. We like to pretend, we like to file those away in the inbox. It's like, that's not going to happen. I'll look at you later. But we like to face those things head on and just prepare for them. And so from that main checking account where we pay our bills from and our income goes into, we set aside money into our savings account, preparing for those things. And that's going to keep us out of that vicious debt cycle that we don't want to get into, where, we've got to take our dog to the vet. We weren't prepared for that. We didn't have money saved up for it. And now we've got to pull out our credit card to save Fido. And now Fido's coming home healthy, but with the form of, debt payments and interest rates. So that's the sort of thing that we want to try to kind of prevent from happening with this system.
Yeah, plan for that unpredictable stuff. The predictable, unpredictable, because we know those things are going to happen. And so just planning in advance and being financially prepared for it. So I love that organization. I love that you have an account just for spending where you can just watch that. Very similar to what we do with the business owners and their operating expenses. They're not necessarily logging or really getting granular. It's just, do we have cash in there? Are we trending in the right way? So for us with cash flow, because it's fluctuates in business, revenue is going to go up and down. There's no controlling that. Whereas on the personal side, especially with business owners, and we can maybe talk about this, but getting consistent paychecks every single time. So hopefully the same amounts coming into you. I know that's not always the case for everybody, but just monitoring those accounts and making sure that you're maybe getting a little cushion, or maybe just not hitting that edge, or not overdrafting constantly. And if you are, that's almost, it's just a red flag, and you know where it's happening. It's not that your bills are out of control. It's that your spending's out of control, or vice versa.
Right. Yeah. And, I think the sweet spot is when, 1 week, maybe it's a little tight, maybe it's a little hard to make the money last until that next transfer, but then the next week it felt easy. That's kind of the sweet spot that we want to find. But if we're finding that like every week it's tight and it's really hard to make that money last each week, well, we got to go back and we need to audit. We need to figure out, okay, what are we spending our money on? What do we need to change? What adjustments do we need to make? Do we need to pay ourselves more in this day-to-day spending account or not? And the other really cool thing about the system is it turns your day-to-day spending into a fixed expense. So we do try to transfer the same amount every single week. And now we're not worrying about, did I spend more or less on groceries this week? Did I spend more or less on gas this week? We've turned all of their day-to-day spending into a fixed expense. So it's way more predictable, way more visual, way less time. Yeah. And my clients really, it brings them a lot of freedom when they do it this way.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so that last piece would be that consistent paycheck on their side. What do you recommend when you see those people, like we said at the top of the call? They come to you and they've just been kind of pulling money here and there. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's not. What's your usual first recommendation there?
Yeah, so I usually recommend, let's just figure out a fixed amount that you can pay yourself for now in order to reach your goals. And then I always put in the plug, go talk to one of our profit coaches, and they'll make sure that this, is something that you can start doing with your business so that it can be sustainable for you. And so, figuring out what is that amount that we need to be paying yourself every single month, and then working towards making sure they do it that way. If they are able to pay themselves more than we talked about, well, that's where we get to have a lot of fun reaching goals and just fast tracking, their future.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And we do have that episode on how to pay yourself more money more consistently, which will take over where you kind of just let it. We've talked about the personal side, and then how do we then set up the business in order to do that? And so again, we'll link that in the show notes. But Alicia, thank you so much for just sharing your wealth of knowledge. You will be co-hosting many times, so we'll have you back on before too long. But if you need help with personal finances, getting organized on your personal side because it's either affecting your business or your personal life, definitely reach out to Alicia. We'll have a link in the show notes as well to schedule a free call with her to see if how she can help, if she can help, and if coaching makes sense. Thanks for joining us on the Therapy Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a practice owner that you may know. If your practice needs help getting organized with its finances or just growing your practice, head to therapybusinesspod.com to learn how we can help.